This is the Christopher Nolan logical explanation video. There are many ways to arrive at the solution of this puzzle. Without guessing, this is just one way. Starting with rule number 3, the earliest movie and the latest movie should both be moved to column 1, and according to rule number 6, they should be in order of release from top to bottom. These would be Memento and Oppenheimer. We know from rule number 2 that rows 2 and 4 only contain movies, and since there are only 8 movies, all movies should be in either row 2 or row 4. This means Memento and Oppenheimer should be placed in these two positions, respectively. From rule number 1, we know that cast members are adjacent to all movies they have credited roles in. Cillian Murphy is featured in Oppenheimer, meaning he must belong in one of these two positions. In addition to Oppenheimer, Cillian Murphy has starred in Dunkirk, Inception, and The Dark Knight Rises. The only position that allows for Cillian Murphy to be adjacent to these 4 movies is this position right here. In this position, he could be adjacent to 4 movies, but one of them would have to be Memento. Therefore, Cillian Murphy must be placed here. Guy Pearce is featured in Memento, and now can only be placed in one of these 3 positions. However, we know from rule number 4 that all cast members in row 1 have had roles in the Dark Knight trilogy. Therefore, Guy Pearce can only be placed in this position in row 3. Michael Caine has a credited role in 5 movies present on the grid. For the same reasons as Cillian Murphy, the only position he can be placed is here. This position is the only position left that will allow him to be adjacent to at least 5 movies. There are 6 cast members in the grid who had roles in The Dark Knight Rises. The only position that allows for The Dark Knight Rises to be adjacent to all 6 of its cast members is here. The Dark Knight Rises could be adjacent to 6 cast members in this position, but one of them would be Guy Pearce, meaning only 5 of The Dark Knight Rises cast members could be adjacent. Therefore, it belongs in this position. Inception, which stars 5 cast members present in the grid, can now only be placed here. From the remaining movies that must be placed, The Prestige is the earliest release. Therefore, The Prestige cannot be placed in any of the remaining positions in row 4, meaning it must be placed in this final position in row 2. Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Marion Cotillard have roles in both Inception and The Dark Knight Rises. Since Cillian Murphy and Michael Caine already occupy these 2 squares, the only 2 positions where these 2 could go are here and here. According to rule number 7, Batman, who is played by Christian Bale, must be adjacent to Robin, who is played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Christian Bale must also be adjacent to The Prestige. Therefore, Christian Bale must be placed in the top right corner, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt must be placed next to him. Ken Watanabe must be adjacent to Inception, and so must go in the last remaining adjacent position, in the top left corner. In accordance with rule number 4, Ken Watanabe has had a role in the Dark Knight trilogy, but not in The Dark Knight Rises. So he can be placed in row 1, without having to be adjacent to The Dark Knight Rises. We now have row 1, row 2, and column 1 solved. Anne Hathaway is the only cast member remaining, and so must belong in the only position left in row 3. Tenet is the only movie left that only stars 1 actor present in the grid, and so according to rule number 5, must belong in the bottom right corner. And Hathaway must be adjacent to Interstellar, and so Interstellar must be placed here, leaving Dunkirk in the final remaining position in the grid. If we check logic now, we'll see the logical is solved and without any guessing.